Good afternoon, everyone. So, as we all know, Silicon Valley is a worldwide innovation center. There are so many successful leaders, entrepreneurs, CEOs, as well as investors. Today, I'm very excited to introduce you a great CEO, a great leader, a great role model. He's the CEO of LinkedIn. And before we give Jeff Weiner, before we give him a big round of applause, I'd like to share with you a little bit of number about LinkedIn. So Jeff joined LinkedIn in 2008 as a CEO. And Jeff's leadership, their employee headcount grew from 338 employees, even much smaller than Zoom now, grew the employee headcount to over 12,000. Membership base from 33 million to 575 million. Revenue from less than 100 million to over 5 billion. Let's give Jeff a big round of applause. Yep. Jeff, thank you so much. I know you're very busy and still come to our Zoomtopia. I really appreciate it. I remember several years ago, our investor, Jerry Yuan, he invited you to give a speech to all of his portfolio companies. And I was there too. And you talk about the culture, leadership, how to build a scalable business. And I was so impressed. After that, I look at all your blogs, for sure published in LinkedIn, and also all your YouTube videos. And recently, I read your commencement speech you delivered early this year at your alma mater in Wharton School at UPenn, right? Can you please share with us a little bit about the focus of the speech, which was centered around the importance of being compassionate? So what does that mean, manage compassionately?
So before I answer, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me. A huge fan of Eric's. Jerry, somewhat recently, several years after I had the opportunity to talk to his portfolio companies, asked if I would spend a little bit of time with Eric. Jerry's a big investor in Zoom. And we had the opportunity to sit down, and I'm not just saying that because I'm on the stage here at his event. Jerry can vouch for this, but I was absolutely blown away. And it's rare to meet someone with Eric's talents, and it's almost unfair for someone to have the technology background that you do, be so good at product development and be a world-class CEO. And I think the fact that you rated as the #1 CEO on Glassdoor is very well-deserved. So how about a big round of applause for Eric and the incredible job he's done in building this company. But when he invited me to join, I said yes.
Yeah, by the way, as Jeff he's my role model. He is ranked at top Glassdoor CEO 5 years in a row. Let's give Jeff a big round of applause.
No, you, Eric. You're just going to do this for the rest of the day. So with regard to the speech, the commencement speech I had the opportunity to deliver, what a privilege that was at my alma mater at the Wharton School undergrad. I basically talked about the advice I would give my 22-year-old self, and I summed it up as 2 words. It's to be compassionate. And it's something that came to me much, much later in life. I certainly wasn't taught about compassion when I was a student. It wasn't something that a lot of people spent time focusing on, and most definitely not in the business world. And it wasn't until I was about 30 years old I read a book called The Art of Happiness. It was about the teachings of the Dalai Lama. It was in that book that I first began to understand the definition of compassion, and even more importantly, the distinction between compassion and empathy, which in Western society in particular has a tendency to be used synonymously. And I think it's really important to be able to delineate between the two in order to be able to practice those 2 qualities. Empathy is feeling what another living thing feels. And oftentimes you hear about managers or business leaders, even academicians will talk about the importance of empathy. But it's quite distinct from compassion. Compassion, classically defined, is putting yourself in the shoes of another person, seeing the world through their lens or perspective, for the sake of ultimately alleviating their suffering. And in a business setting, I think alleviating one's suffering is a bit of a higher bar than is necessary. I like to talk about just helping someone or helping them achieve their objectives. But compassion, the import of the distinction between the two is that if I were to feel what another person's feeling, in particular if we're experiencing conflict or tension, I'm not going to be able to resolve that conflict or tension. If Eric's angry and I'm feeling his anger, there's not much I'm going to be able to do about that. But compassion is essentially empathy plus action. It's maintaining enough space between myself and the other person where I can actually do something about the way that they're feeling. And the way the Dalai Lama illustrates this in the book, and I'll never forget it, if you were walking along a mountainous trail and you came upon someone who's being crushed with a boulder on their chest, the empathetic response would be to feel the same sense of crushing suffocation, which would render you helpless. The compassionate response would be to recognize that they're suffering, that they can't breathe, and perhaps drawing upon your own experience, you've been in a similar circumstance, you're going to do everything within your power to remove the boulder from their chest. And so within a work environment, it's all about being a spectator to your own thoughts when you get triggered by another person, when you're experiencing that conflict or tension, which happens to all of us virtually every day when we're working with other people. It's very human. And to see how you're being triggered and start to go deeper in terms of what may be triggering the other person, recognizing that they don't necessarily have nefarious intention, that they're not being political, that they're not necessarily ignorant, that you may have said something that reminded them of a meeting they had had long before they ever met you. Or you're talking about a subject that they're not as knowledgeable about and they're feeling a little vulnerable or insecure, or they may even be having a bad day. And if you can take the time to understand that, and you can understand whatever it is that they're experiencing, you can forge a stronger connection. And in forging that stronger connection, you can build much better relationships within your organization, and that can generate a lot of value.
That's super awesome. Thank you. So also wonder, what kinds of lessons or events you learned in your early career to help you manifest this philosophy?
So the first time it ever really, so I read that book when I was 30, and it wasn't until probably at least 5, 6, maybe even 7 years later that I started to begin to put into practice. I say begin to put into practice. Look, I aspire to manage compassionately. I aspire to manage compassionately every day, but I use the word aspire because it's really, really hard. Because we're all egocentric by design. It's human nature. And when I say egocentric, it's important to recognize egocentricity is not egomaniacism. Okay, egocentric is seeing the world through your own perspective, which is done really to protect us and keep us safe, where we can draw upon our own experiences and do pattern matching to make good decisions. And so I remember, like a lot of young executives, I took a more egocentric view of the world. I expected the people on my team to do things the way I was doing them. And that's not that unusual for a younger executive, a less experienced executive, who in theory was given more responsibility because they had been doing a good job.
Yep.
So it's kind of natural to assume that you're doing something right. So wouldn't it make sense for the other people on your team to do things in a similar way? And I'll never forget it. I was on a team, and the manager of this team was growing increasingly frustrated with one of my colleagues who wasn't doing things exactly the way our manager wanted them done, even though this person was doing an effective job. Yep. And so as a result, our manager would undermine them during staff meetings, make jokes at their expense, kind of be very critical, openly critical, and it was very uncomfortable for us. And it not only hurt my colleague, it kind of undermined the team and it undermined our manager. And so at a one-on-one, I took the manager aside and I said, I really need to be candid with you about something. This dynamic where you continue to express your frustration, I think it's hurting everyone on the team, and the next time you feel like doing that, you should go find a mirror and kind of express that frustration to yourself, because you're the reason that person's in the role. Mm-hmm. And if you want them to do things differently, you should coach them as to why. And if for whatever reason it's not the right fit, you should look for another opportunity for that individual within the company, or constructively transition them to another opportunity outside the company. And he said, thanks for your input, I'll give it some thought. And a few weeks later he came back to me, he said, look, I've been giving it a lot of thought, And I've already started to put it into practice, and I'm going to start to do this with everyone on my team. And I just wanted to thank you. I'm really grateful. And as he was saying this, I realized I was doing the exact same thing with someone on my team. I mean the exact same thing. I was growing frustrated with a member of my team who wasn't doing things the way I thought they should do them. And this person aspired to be in a role like mine one day, so thought he needed to pattern himself after the way I was doing the role. And neither one of us at that point were playing to his strengths. And I wasn't coaching him on his areas for improvement. And if you want to get the best out of someone, you need to take the time to understand who they are, what they're trying to accomplish, their hopes, their dreams, their fears, their insecurities, and do everything within your power to set them up to be successful. And it was after that moment that I kind of vowed to myself, for as long as I'd be managing other people, I would aspire to manage compassionately.
Thank you. So when you joined LinkedIn 2008, it was relatively small, right? Only 338 employees. You managed it very well and helped the company grow to become a public company, and also become a very successful public company CEO. You also did very well, managed the team compassionately, and then later on, and also you led the team to go through the Microsoft acquisition. You also did very well. I want to understand, how did you do that consistently? Why is consistency so important? Also, yeah, I feel like your employees, they all trust you, right? Among those three phases of the growth. This morning, we invited Stephen and Mark Carvey talk about the trust. What's your advice about the trust also?
Well, it's interesting because trust is really foundational to the way we've managed. Generating trust is foundational to the way we manage through those three phases. Trust for me, an old friend once shared a bit of wisdom that I never forgot, that trust equals consistency over time. Simple formula for a pretty complex human dynamic. And that there's no substitute for either one of those dimensions. People aren't going to trust you just because you tell them in the moment, trust me, you can trust me. And you've got to be consistent over time to build that trust and to maintain that trust. And it's something that we've tried to do at LinkedIn from the earliest of days. And you know, I've never really thought about the dynamic of trust within the context of those three phases, but it makes perfect sense the way you frame the question. So in those earliest days, I'm the new CEO, and I have to earn people's trust. Why should they trust that the decisions that I'm making are the right decisions for them and the company? Mm-hmm. When we took the time to codify our mission and our vision, our culture and our values, why should they trust that that's the right direction for us as an organization? So you have to do everything you can to earn that trust. And at the time of the public offering, again, that's a huge leap. You're going from a privately held company to a publicly held company. I had never been the CEO of a publicly held company. I had to earn their trust. I had to earn the trust of our team. Every day that we would successfully navigate that transition, that it wasn't an end game in and of itself, it was just a stepping stone towards the realization of our mission and our vision, and that our culture and our values would not change despite the fact that we were becoming public. By way of example, one of our core values is to be open, honest, and constructive. So transparency is important to us within the organization, and there was some members of my team that felt like we wouldn't be able to continue our all hands. We do an all hands every other week, and we're completely open at the all hands. We talk about what's working, what's not working, and some folks said, you're not going to be able to do that after we go public. And I said, of course we are. We have to play up to who we aspire to be in terms of our culture, not down to the lowest common denominator driven by fear. And so that requires a lot of trust. And then of all three of those phases, it may have been the acquisition that required the most trust, especially for people who had been through acquisitions previously, and those acquisitions hadn't gone well. Acquisitions are difficult. Acquisition integrations can be incredibly challenging. And you know, we talked at the time. It was something that Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, felt very strongly about, was for LinkedIn to be able to preserve its independence in service of the realization of our mission and our vision. And putting my trust in Satya and the Microsoft leadership team, and knowing that the team trusted me, that was so integral to being able to make that work. And when I said nothing was going to change in terms of what we were trying to accomplish and how we were trying to accomplish it, it was important that people trusted that that would be the case, and then give us the benefit of the doubt so we can demonstrate to them day in and day out that that would be the case. And I think that has become foundational to one of the reasons that the integration has gone as well as it has thus far to date.
I see. So speaking of Satya, Microsoft CEO, I read his book, Hate Refresh. I really like it. It's a great book. I feel, your philosophy and his philosophy fits very well together.
Yeah.
And any advice for me or all other managers how to quickly shift mindset to manage, compassionately? I really want to learn quickly. So,
I've never been asked about how to do it quickly. I've been asked on how to do it.
Because I have a pressure from all the users, employees, right? I needed to. So.
I think first and foremost, it's important to recognize it's going to take time for the reasons that we were just talking about.
Yep.
Because people are going to need to trust that it's the right thing to do.
Yep.
And as we just mentioned, trust is about consistency over time. In terms of the actual practice, I think first and foremost, knowing your commitment to doing it and getting it right, it starts with you and the leadership team because you are the ones who need to really walk the walk on the culture and the values. And to the extent you want managing compassionately to be central to the way Zoom is doing business, you need to model that behavior. And it only begins with you. It certainly doesn't end there, because at the end of the day, every employee within the organization is responsible for manifesting the culture and the values. And it doesn't matter to what extent your leadership has conviction and how effective they are as leaders. At the end of the day, it's up to every single member of the team to remain committed to honoring the culture and honoring the values. So if compassion is going to be baked into that, it needs to start with you, but everyone needs to contribute to it. I think there's a few things that can certainly facilitate the practice of managing compassionately. The first is being more mindful. As I mentioned earlier, one of the most important parts of managing compassionately is the ability to be a spectator to your own thoughts, especially when you become emotional. And when we become emotional, that's when we're typically least rational and we're least able to put ourselves in the shoes of another person. So that kind of mindfulness practice becomes essential. And you can develop that as an individual, you can develop that as a team. It could be explicitly oriented around a meditation practice. It could be just literally putting enough buffer in your schedule where you have the time to think. But mindfulness is going to be an important ingredient there. I think it's also important to demonstrate to people throughout meetings, throughout the day, where managing compassionately makes sense. When you're in a meeting and you see a conflict, the ability to kind of hit the pause button and de-escalate things and explain to folks why you're going to manage through this the way that you are. And demonstrating to people how it can be done, I think that's going to be important. To the extent you and the team are committed to making this happen, and you put the right building blocks in place, and those were two examples of how to practice, it then has to become part of everyone's day-to-day operational feedback loop. So it's got to be integral to the way in which you're recruiting, not just being compassionate, but all of your culture and all of your values. You can't compromise. There's a tendency, especially for hypergrowth companies, and you're the definition of hypergrowth right now, there is kind of a natural tendency to lower the bar and to compromise your culture and values as you're bringing new talent into the organization because you can't hire fast enough to keep up with demand. And there's a lot of pressure and a great sense of urgency to put butts in seats. And it's so critical that you maintain that bar. It's, I think, one of the most common ways hypergrowth companies go off the rails is by compromising on their culture and values as they're hiring more and more people. So that's first. Second, it's not just about recruiting. It doesn't end after you hire somebody. That's actually when it really begins. And whether it's onboarding or learning and development, just constantly reinforcing what it is that the company is about. From day one, you know, there may be some folks who were recruited and they joined the company, and if in that first onboarding session they're not hearing the same, it would be easy to assume that they were hearing sales pitches and you know, the things that they wanted to hear and cheerleading. And so when the company can demonstrate that it wasn't just about recruiting, that it's so central and so core to what the company does and who the company is, That becomes integral. And then beyond onboarding, learning, and development, I think it needs to be baked into the way in which you're evaluating performance. At LinkedIn, one of the best practices we developed, and it's coming up on 10 years, is that when we're evaluating the performance of members of our team, it's not just about the results that they're generating, it's about how they're generating those results. And I think far too often, companies have a tendency to almost completely weight the results or overweight the results. But you can start to develop some really bad practices and habits when you empower people that aren't really acting in the right way within an organization. So if you can put the right building blocks in place around a compassionate practice, and you're then manifesting that day in and day out, it can be done. I don't know how quickly that can be done, but it can be done.
I know I cannot do it quickly now, so. But
let me know if you need any
I
help.
will work hard on that.
I'm a call away.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thank you. So, what is the role compassion plays in realize your LinkedIn's vision?
So with regard to LinkedIn, it really starts with our vision. We draw a distinction between vision and mission. The mission at the company to connect the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful. That mission is a singular, overarching objective that for us is measurable, realizable, and hopefully inspirational. The vision is different. It's related, but different. The vision is the dream. The vision is true north. The vision was originally put into place solely for the purpose of inspiring our team. And something happened several years ago where we were growing so quickly with regard to the rate in which we were adding new members that we started to think beyond the mission and what could we do with our vision to operationalize the vision. The vision at LinkedIn is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce, all of them. There's 780 million knowledge workers or professionals in the world. That's the core target audience for that mission statement I just described. There's over 3 billion people in the global workforce. So that's a very different objective. And like I said several years ago, when we saw the path towards not necessarily completing the mission, but certainly connecting all the world's professionals, there's still plenty of work to be done in terms of making them more productive and successful, we started to set our sights on the vision. And that vision really has a compassionate component that's baked into it, implicitly and explicitly. To create economic opportunity for everyone means you need to get out of your own head, your own way of thinking, your own networks, not necessarily just creating value for those people that went to the right school, that worked at the right companies, that have the right relationships, but thinking about everyone, thinking about people who have not had access to those kinds of opportunities. And you know, it's funny because compassion is not just related to the vision, it's also related very much to the mission. So with regard to the vision, we're thinking increasingly about going beyond knowledge workers to include frontline workers, blue-collar workers, middle-skill workers. And for those people within the organization that have grown up as knowledge workers and professionals, it requires us to put ourselves in their shoes to better understand product market fit and to extend the company's capabilities beyond where they are today. But it also is equally applicable to our mission because there are plenty of professional aspirants in the world, people who would fall within a white-collar classification or a knowledge worker who also don't have access to opportunity. Underserved segments of the population, underrepresented groups and minorities, veterans, opportunity youth, first-generation college graduates. And putting ourselves in their shoes, asking ourselves difficult questions, trying to proactively address unintended consequences. That's where compassion comes to play in terms of what it is we ultimately hope to accomplish. And I'll give you a perfect example, a story, recent story. How many people here have ever gotten a job by virtue of who they know, their network? Okay, it's about 90%, 85%. So recognizing this and looking at the natural assets and strengths of the company, we realized that we could create a lot of value for members if we added an ask for referral link on our job posts. And we did it. It was pretty seamless. And the results were incredible. So people that were asking for a referral, they'd hit a job post. They'd see who they knew within the company by virtue of their professional network. They'd ask for a referral. And then recruiters, hiring managers could see how they knew the person. And folks who did that were 8 times more likely to get hired for that job. Wow. So we were all celebrating that feature. And a woman on our team, Meg Garlinghouse, who runs the social impact team, She came to me and she said, Jeff, I understand people are celebrating this feature and that's wonderful, but what about folks who don't have the relationships? What about the folks, as I mentioned earlier, who didn't go to the right school, they didn't graduate with a prestigious 4-year degree, or they didn't work at those hot companies, and they don't have the relationships? Isn't this going to perpetuate this kind of vicious cycle and this kind of unconscious bias? And she just kind of stopped me in my tracks. And I wasn't the only one. The rest of the team that heard the same recognized that we needed to do more. And so we ended up creating what we call a career advice hub, which enables any member on LinkedIn to raise their hand when they need help, who may not have the right backgrounds or connections, but they have all those raw materials, they have the aptitude to be fantastic. And for other members of LinkedIn to volunteer to help them and to mentor them. And though it's only been up and running for several months, we've already had roughly 2 million people ask for help, and over 1 million people volunteer to help them. So that's kind of the power of asking those difficult questions and being more compassionate.
Yeah. So speaking of help, that's very important. So today, we are in what is called as the fourth industry revolution, right? And the factors like artificial intelligence, and work, skills, the gap, and also the rise of independent workforces, are all trends that those professionals as well as employers that are preparing to face or facing today. So from your perspective, what's the LinkedIn role, or maybe the tech role more broadly, in creating some economic opportunities to help those professionals and employers who are attempting to navigate those shifts?
Yeah. There's a lot of changes happening seemingly all at once. There's this incredible conflation. You just mentioned 3 trends that we've certainly identified as being increasingly impactful with regard to the global workforce. The rise of AI and automation, the rise of independent workers, and increasing urgency around skills gaps, multiple skills gaps, depending on geography. And there's a lot of different companies and consulting firms and some think tanks and some really smart people who've tried to figure out what the impact of all these variables are going to have on the workforce. If you just take AI alone or automation, there's predictions. McKinsey just came out earlier this year and said between 400 million and 800 million jobs could be displaced by 2030. Not net job loss, but just displacement. And jobs will be created as well as a byproduct of AI. And so you think about how much uncertainty is being created, and rather than try to definitively answer the questions, because to a large extent I don't think people know, it's like sensitive dependence on initial conditions, there's just so much uncertainty. Where we think we can add value is multifold. First, we have this extraordinarily valuable repository of data and insights that can better enable companies to understand the fastest growing jobs within their organization, the skills required to obtain those jobs, the aggregate skills of their current workforce, the size of those gaps. Where gaps exist, we can provide them the training materials to close those gaps and reskill their current workforce. We can also provide them the data and the insights and the search capabilities to identify talent pools outside of their current organization so they can target the right prospects and the most relevant members of their future workforce. So that would be one example. And it's not just specific to companies. As a matter of fact, everything I just described, the original kind of prototype for that product, which we call LinkedIn Talent Insights, was work that we did around something we call the economic graph, which we provide, in part, the insights from the economic graph to governments all over the world who are interested in trying to figure out how they can create more economic opportunity for their citizens and understand where those skills gaps are most acute, where they need to invest in the right learning materials, where they need to create the right incentives for employers to create the right jobs. So those are some examples.
That's awesome. So for those knowledge workers, right, so in the next several years, given all those changes, so what kind of a skill set you think are most critical for many years to come?
So
maybe they want to join LinkedIn, so how can we pass the interview? So
it's really interesting when you talk about what skills are going to be most valuable going forward, because a couple of the answers are not necessarily intuitive. If anything, they may be counterintuitive. And it really starts with the skills gaps. Here in the United States, for example, if you ask people where the most acute skills gap is, what would you say if I asked you where the largest imbalance is between jobs and talent? What would you say in terms of a skill set? technology, software development, that's right, software engineers. It turns out the #1 skills gap in the United States is not software engineering or anything related to it. It's soft skills. Written communication, oral communication, team building, collaboration, those kinds of skills. And jobs like salespeople, business development, sales development, project management. These are some of the jobs where you see the largest gaps. And don't make any mistake about it, there's also a very significant gap with regard to software engineering, and specifically areas like software development and cloud computing, data storage, web development, etc. But the soft skills thing is really interesting. The good news, and we had our recent customer event over the last couple of days, and we spent a little bit of time talking about this very issue. The good news with regard to the soft skills gap is twofold. One, computers aren't going to be able to replicate these people-to-people skills, interpersonal skills, replicate real human behavior, not for some period of time. And so there's great incentive for people to hone their soft skills because I think those jobs are going to be more stable for longer periods. The second thing is this is a highly tractable problem. All of our companies, your company, LinkedIn, all of your companies, possess expertise and experience within your organizations. It's just a question of unlocking those teachers, those thought leaders, those influencers to help retrain your current workforce and to help train future prospects. And increasingly, whether it's through a platform like LinkedIn Learning or other learning and development platforms, there's a lot of mechanisms and channels to make that possible. So soft skills is going to be one of the areas that I think people increasingly need to focus on, and it's far too easily overlooked. The other one, while people have a tendency to knee-jerk towards advanced technology, AI, for example, which is another area that clearly you have a gap, digital fluency, basic digital fluency. How to send an email, how to operate a spreadsheet, word processing, putting together a presentation. These basic foundational skills are going to become absolutely essential towards ensuring that we can properly reskill the current and future workforce for the jobs that are and will be, and not just the jobs that once were. And the reason is fairly straightforward, because ultimately people are going to need to learn more advanced skills. If they don't have those basic building blocks, it becomes almost prohibitively difficult for them to learn multiple skills simultaneously. So digital fluency and soft skills, I think, are two areas that people have a tendency to overlook, which are going to become increasingly valuable.
That's awesome. Probably I can add 2 more skills: how to use LinkedIn and Zoom. So, yeah, this more for sure you do not need to learn that. It's very easy to use. So, and. So this morning I shared with the audience, so like last year our Zoomtopia, the theme is about happiness. So our marketing team, this suggested for me to sing a song, to kick off the Zoomtopia.
You sang a song last year?
I tried, I worked so hard, I failed badly, so I did not do that. Did
you sing the Shakira song from Zoomtopia?
No, I tried, I did not do that.
No,
actually,
okay.
they did not give me green light, because this is terrible. But
wait, hang on, time out. Just paint the picture here. So the team said, we'd love for you to kick off the event with a song. You then practiced a song, and it was so bad they said, we're not doing this anymore?
It's before my team told me that my song already stopped me. So, and it's Dad, you better stop. So anyway, I did stop. So we've heard you have a great formula for choosing a great karaoke song.
Karaoke Algorithm,
yeah.
Yes.
What's that? I'm very familiar.
The Karaoke Algorithm. Yeah. So it's only kind of half serious, but I like a good karaoke session as much as the next person, and have had a few observations over the years in terms of how to pick the ideal song. So first and foremost, people have a tendency to gravitate towards their favorite songs. Makes perfect sense. The problem is that most of our favorite songs have been performed by some of the most gifted musicians and singers ever. These are not necessarily people you should be trying to replicate. Okay? Stevie Wonder, Elton John, Freddie Mercury, Bon Jovi, Journey. These are some big voices. Yeah. And that's just the guys for me. I mean, for the women, Aretha Franklin, Whitney Houston, these are people that can sing. So just automatically saying, oh, I love that song, I'm going to try to sing that song, not a great idea. That's one. Two, the faster the song The more up-tempo the song, typically the more challenging. So a slower tempoed song, I think, is a better choice. Okay, it's a little easier to sing. And then third, which is by far and away the most important rule of thumb here, is that you want to sing a song that the audience can sing along with. And the reason for that is that as they're singing, they're going to drown you out. So no one can hear you. Also, like any effective public speaking, people don't necessarily remember the words, or in this case, the quality of your singing voice. They remember the way you made them feel. So if you get the audience singing along with you and having fun, they're going to be like, ah, that was awesome, that was fantastic, even if you can't sing a note. So my go-to and the song that I believe really epitomizes those three qualities is Sweet Caroline, which I'm not going to be performing right now. Not going to happen. Dun-na-na. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's not happening. It's not happening. It's not happening.
Wow, I made a huge mistake.
Did you go Bohemian Rhapsody?
I should have called you last year. I probably can pass. So, thank you. So, given that you have roots in media, so what shows are you really enjoying now?
Have we transitioned this interview at some point? I think we were going from. So these questions are way more fun. What am I watching now? Yes, I was in the media world. I worked at Warner Brothers for quite some time. My dad was an executive in the television industry at CBS for many, many years. So love TV, film, music, etc. So in terms of what I'm watching, I just finished Maniac on Netflix. Anyone? Yeah. So just raise your hands if you watched it, just out of curiosity. Keep them up for just a sec, and keep them up if you really, really liked it. Raise your hands. Okay, yeah, that was my experience. So a bunch of hands remained up. It's I got mixed reviews for you. It's wildly unique and inventive, and the filmic quality, the way it was shot and edited, it's amazing and super original. But it's a bit much at times. It was for me. I saw Ozark season 2. I thought it was very similar. Oh, some Ozark fans in the audience. Okay. I thought it was very similar to Ozark season 1. Frankly, I was expecting a bit more, if I'm being frank. I thought it was going to continue to build. Huge Jason Bateman fan. I thought it was going to ultimately feel more like Breaking Bad, which for me is the ultimate in 1 hour binge-worthy dramas. That and The Wire. And then this is wildly inappropriate. It's on Netflix and it's publicly available, so I can comment on it. There's a show called Big Mouth that, so it's hard to recommend, and you'll see why if you watch it. And it's, like I said, it's kind of inappropriate. It's like Family Guy taken to the next level in terms of inappropriateness. It is genius. It's brilliant. So those are the most recent shows I've watched.
I should start from all those questions. That's much more fun. Okay. So for all the aspiring leaders in the room, what's the one thing you do every day without a fail to help you to be the best leader you can be?
I wish I did any of the things I'm going to talk about in just a second every day. Like managing compassionately, these are aspirations. I wish I did them every day. These are going to sound so mundane and potentially so pedantic, like something your parent would say to you, but for me, it's the answer. First, a good night's sleep. And that was not, I sound like Ariana Huffington at Thrive talking about the importance of sleep. That was not the case when I was younger. I could go on very little sleep for a long period of time, and I didn't see any impact to my day-to-day performance or the way I felt. But I need a good night's sleep these days. So that's one. 2 is eating right. I told you, mundane and pedantic. Eating right, I think, is absolutely critical. Working out regularly. And then a meditation practice for me, a mindfulness practice, which for me is really meditation. And I'll tell you another one that I do a much better job of doing every single day, consistently. It's adding buffer into my schedule. So I don't know if we talked about this when we sat down. I have 90 minutes of buffer time scheduled every day. So if you were to look at my schedule, which gets printed out and it gets thumbtacked to the wall in my office where I sit, you would notice either 3 30-minute blocks that were grayed out. You'd notice an hour block grayed out and a 30-minute block, rarely a 90-minute block at this point. But I can't do my job unless I've got this buffer time. And I can use that time any way it makes sense. I can catch my breath, go for a walk, take an unscheduled meeting. I can clear out my inbox. I can synthesize things that I've heard that day, data points, insights, articles that I've been reading. I can think strategically. I can read something I've been meaning to read. And it's interesting because when I first started my job, like a lot of people, I felt like I had to schedule every minute of every day. And then if I wasn't doing that, I wasn't doing my job. And the longer I was in the role of CEO, the more I came to realize that if I didn't have these buffers, I wasn't doing my job. So I think that's really important.
It's awesome. Speaking of adding buffers, I remember I stopped by in your office, right? I shared with you, so busy, any advice. You did tell me about that, and then later on, when I went back to office, I did started changing that. I think looking back, that's the best advice. I feel like my life every day, every week is much better. Thank you. So, given that LinkedIn is so popular, I'm pretty sure all of us will have LinkedIn account, right?
Any LinkedIn?
All of us, right? Whoever has an email account, for sure you have a LinkedIn account. I guarantee you. So, given that you have 600 million users, I'm pretty sure you're going to grow the user base to 1 billion users very soon. So how do you think about the unintended consequences, right, for a platform technology like LinkedIn?
It kind of touches on the point we raised earlier in terms of asking ourselves those difficult questions. And I certainly don't think this is specific to LinkedIn, and I think it's something increasingly as an industry we all need to be thinking about. Companies in the Valley, when they create these breakthroughs, when they continue to innovate, I think for the most part, if not entirely, have nothing but the best of intentions in terms of the value that they want to create in the world. But these technologies are scaling so quickly, and the pace of innovation is accelerating so much that it's really challenging to fully appreciate the impact that these innovations and technologies are going to have on the world and the people around us. And so I think it's all about, to the best of our ability, proactively asking ourselves these difficult questions. And despite having the best of intentions, how could this go wrong? Who is this going to create value for? Who is it not going to create value for? Who are we going to reach with these technologies? Who's going to be excluded? What can we do for those that are going to be excluded so that we can create a more inclusionary capability or product or service? How does our sense of purpose as the technology industry or for individual companies, how does our sense of purpose align not only doing well, but doing good? Ideally, those two things are not mutually exclusive. And you don't have to create separate initiatives within your organization that are solely philanthropically oriented. If you've got a purpose that your company is trying to pursue, which in and of itself creates value beyond shareholder value and creates value for your employees, your customers, the community at large. I think Mark Benioff has nailed it when he talks about the fact that any organization, especially a public organization, that thinks its sole responsibility is about creating and maximizing shareholder values got it wrong. All of our companies, all of our organizations, all of our teams have multiple constituents that we serve. And increasingly, it's important to create value for all of those constituencies.
Thank you, Jeff. So every time when I sit down with you, I really learn a lot. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, Jeff. Let's give Jeff a big round of applause.